Chapter 37, in which Mrs. Pratchett speaks to a doctor. At the same morning, while her husband stays here with the old grandparents and the children, Mrs. Pratchett decides to make a visit to certified therapist Phil Hollister, who is a professional when it comes to discussing about children's problems. If there are problems from her children, she would go there and ask for his advice. She stopped at a brick structure in Beverly Avenue. In front of her was a door with a sign on it that read, Philip Gareth Hollister, Certified Therapist. She got out of the door and went inside. The room she entered was small and rectangular, with two white doors at both ends, and a white counter with a window between them that showed the main office. A blue rug covered the tiled floor. At one end of the room, besides one of the white doors, was a couch with a table beside it that had several children's magazines on top of it. At the other end was a different couch with a different table next to it, this one also with several grown-up magazines on it. She went up to the white counter that was between the two white doors and spoke to the woman seated at the desk behind the window. "Hello," Mrs. Pratchett said. "I want to speak to Mr. Hollister. Is he available?" The woman behind the counter nodded. "Well, you're early. Yes, I will let you speak to him. Just have a seat, and I'll call him right away." Mrs. Pratchett then sat on the couch and thumbed through a Good Housekeeping magazine, while she waited for him to call her back to his office. The door to her left was opened. A man with golden brown hair and a golden brown goatee stood in front of them. He wore a light blue button-down long-sleeved shirt, beige pants, a black belt, black socks, and black shoes. A yellow tie with black and white stripes dangled from the collar of his shirt. He was slightly overweight. He looked down at her and raised his eyebrows. She looked up and shook his hand. "Good to see you, Mrs. Pratchett," he said, before instructing her, motioning with his finger. "Come with me, please." She got up and followed him down the hall. He stopped and pointed to a room that was lit up by a single fluorescent light, and whose door was ajar. Once she was in the room, he walked in himself and closed the door. He motioned her to have a seat in front of his desk, while on the speakers a faint voice sang out, "Yes, sir, that's my baby. No, sir, I don't mean maybe. Yes, sir, that's my baby now." Once he sat behind his desk, he asked, "So what issues have been troubling you lately?" "It's about the children," she explained. "My children have been obsessed with this cat go for a fortnight. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Having stuff like that stuck in their heads. Who in their right mind would think there is such thing as a cat-go princess?" Cautiously, he said, "Well, not to those who happen to see one. I've read the Times or listened to the radio myself. Some of them are just false, of course. I've recently had many visitors who saw such a girl. They've come through my door one by one. But you know, I can't find a thing that is physically wrong with them. I didn't see a problem with the children I've met either. Mentally, they're bright and rather too imaginative. It happens every day, Mrs. Pratchett. Children have to grow into their imaginations like a pair of giant shoes. I'm certain it even happened to your children." "Occasionally, but I haven't seen them behave this way like their father." "Their father? But it's all right. He just pretended to believe in this girl so they can be relieved after that incident with the neighbor." "But," he asked, "how's your children know about this?" "I've overheard them. They figured it out, but I have no idea how," she said. "I still wanted to keep it that way until the celebration this Sunday. My children are intelligent and perceptive, but I fear that this girl is an imaginary friend and nothing further." "I see. What's the name of this girl?" "Princess Kitty, they call her." "So that's who she is." At any rate, with this Princess Kitty in their minds, it seemed that it kept them occupied more than anything. In other words, it would drive their children to be completely lost in their own little fantasy world, as if they became so engrossed in it. Of course, that means they're unable to focus on important things like school or chores. Lots of kids do, if they have someone like her. I once had my own imaginary friend when I was 5. A talking dog named Timber. Of course, no one could see Timber but me. I had 2 older brothers who often left me behind, and in such a situation, Timber came in mighty handy. Have you ever pointed it out to them by any chance? No. Should me and my husband? It's best to let them realize it in their own time, by their own logic. So why here? And why now? While there's the city's 200th birthday to celebrate. I'm always nervous that things will get unusual here as each day passes, even as we talk. Mrs. Pratchett, things change from time to time. The world is already big and anything can happen. You know, schizoid behavior is a pretty common thing in children. It's accepted because all we grown-ups have this unspoken agreement that children are brainwashed. They have imaginary friends that aren't real. They may go and sit in their bedroom or in the backyard, withdrawing from the world. We have a one-sentence explanation that explains the whole range of such phenomena in children. I promise they'll grow out of it. They'll have to let their friend go. He blinked. My very words, he said. Yes, they'll have to let her go. You happen to find her a bad influence? I want them to grow up, she said. I want them to believe in what's real. Now, I would guess that Todd and Audrey were like the other children I've met. They were in a pretty good position to develop such a disorder. A big imagination, Princess Kitty, who was so real to your children, that she nearly became real to you and your husband. Instead of growing out of childhood schizophrenia, they might as well have grown into it. I mean, they might simply have entered this world of Princess Kitty someday and never come back. She wasn't paying attention to him. She was paying attention to the beckoning cat figurine that was in front of it. What's unusual about it is that the pupils are red and slitted. You like my figurine, Mrs. Pratchett? He asked. It was actually a gift. From whom? She asked. A woman that has an unusual surname. Le Noir, was it? Oh, yes. Le Noir. Kinda reminds me of Le Chat Noir in Paris, which is French for the black cat. Of course, I know my places. Do you want it? She shook her head. Oh, you sure? He asked. Don't even want to look it in the eyes? I'm really not interested in such things, she said. I don't even like those eyes, all red like that. Okay, if that's what you want, I'll put this away for you. He picked up the figurine and placed it behind his desk before continuing on. So, do your children sleep well? Yes. Appetite's good, the both of them? They're fine. But please tell me, is there anything I must do? There is. To make you feel better, they're just going through a condition, a childhood phase. Every child does go through this phase. Eventually, it's something they'll grow out of. They'll grow up like us, and that'll be the end of it. Just wait a few more years. Eventually, they'll have no other choice but to get their head out of the clouds and start keeping both feet on the ground and on reality. Have them try to find a positive attitude towards reality. Embrace its many benefits. If they don't, you should tell them that it's for their own good. Well, I should be going now. I want to thank you. I feel better about all this than I have in a very long time. Okay, he said, smiling. You call if you have any problems, but I don't think you would if this helps. She thanked him very much for his advice. She felt greatly relieved. Mrs. Pratchett came out of the general store with 2 bulging bags full of the things her family needs. However, standing beside her was a handsome black-haired man with a matching mustache and goatee, dressed in gray. Can I help you? She asked. It would be nice if I carry your groceries with you, ma'am, he said. He took one of the bags from her. As she placed one in the back seat of the family car, she said, You sure sound like a philanthropist. Yes, he said. I think the whole city can tolerate philanthropists more often. You got a name? You can call me Mrs. Pratchett. It's best not to know my first name. What about you? Furukawa Ryutaro. So what kind of person are you? I work for an expert in supernatural folklore. Are you? Her eyes widened. Yes, he said. I work for Charlotte Simone Lenoir. I'm guessing you haven't even heard of her before. Well, I've been to the therapist's office with his cat figurine on his desk. He told me it was a gift from her. That she did, Mrs. Pratchett. I'm telling you, Miss Lenoir was openly interested in the strange and unusual, and the way they mingle with the modern world. For one thing, thoughts of precision and order are two things she has against. Aren't you fascinated by them yourself as much as she? I haven't. All a bunch of nonsense I've heard. My family have been very concerned. Ever heard of the cat parade? What about it? It's unbelievable. I should have been here instead of my husband. Hearing the news, it felt like it came out of a dream. He nodded. I understand how they felt. That's what Miss Lenoir does in her career. To reverence the supernatural creatures of old folklore in the ancient times. To reverence and to fear, and to rely on it whenever misfortune comes to interfere towards good people, very good people. We live in a world of boundless perplexity, you and I. When it comes to supernatural creatures, everybody questions. It's the one way to look at things in the universe. The unknown has many who are among the living with many ways of appearing. You think so? Allow me to explain. Every once in a while, things happen to people that just can't be rationalized in a conventional way. So what happened next? Then came Miss Lenoir with her hair of wheat and her frisky demeanor, who immediately responds to the bizarre, the strange, the unexplainable events that happen all across the city. I trust by now we all know what the eventual outcome is going to be when it comes to such stranger things. I could tell you many strange stories, but unfortunately, you wouldn't want to hear them, like something I've heard recently. Like what? Like the cat girl I've read in the papers. I fear that she's responsible for all the things that are happening in this city. You know, I've been told that the girl's name is Princess Kitty. The children told me what she looked like. Pink hair, cat ears, and a tail. Very unusual name. I would expect her to be called Catherine. Kitty sounds like a nickname after all. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. In a few years, my children will have to grow up. Indeed they would, he said, his voice nearly being offended. Perhaps they would need a good talking to. That's exactly what we're going to do after the bicentennial celebration, she said. But we're not going to discipline them the way our neighbor does it, with unnecessary spankings. We'll find a way. He placed the other bag in her trunk and shuts it. I would wish you good luck, he said. It's not like something bad will happen if she doesn't happen to be in the fairground. The imaginary friend. What do you mean? She said. Nothing important. That is, if the people in Cadona hasn't accepted the fact that such ignorance to the unknown has consequences. Even Miss Lenoir wouldn't tolerate it when it comes to their incredulity. That scared her, but just be glad she won't see him again. As she drives off, he stayed behind, talking to himself in a calm fury. Doesn't matter if I didn't tell her that bad things will happen unless the princess is welcomed. I fear that there is still to come. I and others have come to believe that we may fade into obscurity if children and grown-ups had given up believing in us. It seems that this is far more serious than I've imagined. May heaven help the skeptic. How long will they remain blind? Far too long, he would think. Turning, he can see a long beige Peugeot coming to a stop next to him. On top of the prominent radiator grill was a bronze hood ornament in the shape of a hissing cat. The license plate on the front bumper reads MEO-W. Lowering the window on the back door, the Cat Queen's face peered out. "Enjoy your little stroll?" "Far from enjoyable," he said. "I happened to see one of the incredulous people outside this general store. This Mrs. Pratchett character." "So it wasn't just the father who is incredulous," purred the Cat Queen. "Now it's the mother." "Yes." He narrowed his eyes. "Even she wants the children to let the Princess Kitty go. To grow up. Rest assured that she'll suffer like her husband for her incredulity, and the rest of mankind in this city." "Oh yes. My ultimatum is still in effect. Be clear that I never forget that. You know, I once write in my diary, if there's a story being told to children after they're tucked into bed at night, it must include the cause of our existence in the city they live in. The very amusing character which is a result of our existence is this cat girl I've heard about. And now, if the Princess Kitty is considered a heroine, I figured out who the villain is right away. Donovan. Yes. For their incredulity, misfortune shall teach them all a lesson. It is not often that someone comes along who happens to be one of these creatures from folklore. Creatures like us. Now you never mind all the city. We've got things to do, you and I." "Oh, have we now?" He stepped inside the Peugeot and sat next to her. Then he can feel the car driving off. "She told me that while visiting a therapist, she happened to see one of your cat figurines on his desk. Said that he told her that it was a gift from you," he said. "Miss Lenoir gave that therapist the cat figurine. Only for me to have him wrapped around my finger," she said. "As if I wasn't aware that she would come here for advice from him." Advice on having their children get their head out of the clouds and let the Princess Kitty go. "We cannot allow this!" Sadly, it's only the beginning. As the mayor decides to focus on the bicentennial, as he refused to welcome the girl, that time of the celebration is getting more and more nearer with each day that passes. Clearly, like so many incidents, Donovan might have heard the latest news of last night's incident at the Moimo Lighthouse by now. He seized up as he sprouts white fur all over his body with red marks on his face and his triangular ears. From behind, he sprouts 9 tails with the red marks at the end of them. "Arashi no Tori!" he exclaimed. "Can't go blaming the old bird if things get blown out of proportion, darling," she said. "I also heard some balloonists happened to be terrorized by her after they were forced to land near the lighthouse. I hate to see what the bird does to harm them." "Then, with the Princess Kitty remaining here, they would be grateful that she has confronted the Arashi bird, driving the creature away in order to protect the ones she had cared." "But what if Donovan decides to do something about it?" "That I will never allow. We will have to go back to City Hall ourselves. Something must be done if he does." "I guess that means the turning point has passed the moment the Princess Kitty confronted the Arashi bird, saving 2 people in the process. If Donovan cannot tolerate such phenomena in his city and refuse to have the entirety welcome the girl, then his fate is upon his own head. Rest assured that we will not have her existence suppressed any longer, for a storm is coming. A storm so perceptive, so omnipresent, so vengeful, nobody of mortal race can stop it. Nobody except the one. In 2 days' time, if the mayor still refuses, he's going to learn what it means to defy the unknown. A lesson that will soon be learned by the entire city. I will make sure it will never prosper without the Princess Kitty. This concludes Volume 4, Princess Kitty's Adventure in Town. The story of Princess Kitty of KAWAII Wonderland will conclude in Volume 5, Welcome Princess Kitty. This work was written by Byron Kingsley and dramatized for audio by the author. This has been a Studio Kingsley production. Thank you for listening.